We've got a Bilt Storm 2840 we're taking a look at. This thing I checked out maybe a week and a half ago, and basically it looks like it's seen some better days. So all the cables are free and everything, which is good because a lot of these assemblies aren't exactly the best to replace, not the cheapest to replace, but everything seems to be working there. But just by looking at the fuel cap, you can see that it's been sitting outside for a while. So we're going to show you how to get this thing back up and in working order, and kind of the best thing to do to get that done. So when we take this off, when you're looking at the fuel tank, I mean, look at all that rust in there. So as we look down inside the fuel tank itself, wow, I can smell it from all the way over here. I mean, it's packed with rust. We already know by that point that this thing's not going to start. It's had the primer here is completely worn out. So what's probably been happening sitting outside too, it's probably had water just running all down in it. Now I did pull it over to make sure it was free. I checked the oil, there's no gas or anything mixed in with it, and it's at a good level. The oil actually looks good. We'll change it at some point, but I'm going to show you how to get a snowblower that the fuel tank is completely rusted, you know, with something like that, and I'm going to show you how to get that back into action. So when it's this bad, a lot of people will try to clean them, you know, baking soda and vinegar or muriatic acid along with some sort of agitator, nuts and bolts or anything else down on the inside of the tank. I don't do any of that, you know. I mean, this tank, I think it cost me a little over $70 for the tank, but we went ahead and ordered a new tank and a new carburetor for the thing. So new tank and new carb, along with the fuel line, basically the whole fuel system. We'll do the intake gaskets and stuff while we're there, but that's going to keep us back into action. So fuel tank number is a 951-11201. That's the whole assembly. So we got the carburetor. We use an aftermarket here. It's a 951-05275. When we got it in, it's a name brand Huawei carburetor. So they're sold under aftermarket. The OEM is, I don't know, probably double that, probably around $100. This one was maybe, you know, $50, give or take. So for an investment right around $125 or something like that, we're going to get this unit back up and going. So obviously that's not with the cost of the actual snowblower itself, but if I remember right, I didn't pay a whole lot for it anyway. So this is actually a Bilt 31AH 64Q. Is that a Q or a 0? 4711. So that might be a 0. Might be a Q, but anyway, it's got some different part numbers of snow cab and slide shoes and things like that on it. The drive belt, auger belt, spark plug. Go ahead and get this over and I'll show you how to do this. It's nice and quick and easy. And if you try to do anything with that tank, honestly, you're going to be wasting your time. You know, by the time that thing eats away all that rust that's in the tank, you're not going to have anything left. I've tried to clean those tanks, tried to use, you know, muriatic acid and other methods. 9 times out of 10, they're going to leak after you're done because there's not enough metal even left. You know, it's just kind of a pointless battle you're playing with it there. These are 12 millimeter that take the tank off. Now you don't have to do this yet. You can do it later. I'm just going to loosen the 4 bolts up real quick. Take those out. So there's 2 on each side for the tank. And that basically gets your whole tank free at that point. So tank's free after you take 2 out of this side and 2 out of the other side. So we're free there. Then we're going to take the other ones out of the other side. There's 10 millimeter bolts. The air compressor always likes to kick on as soon as I start recording. It's like it knows. All right. And then we've got one on the side here that's also a 10 millimeter. You don't need a whole lot to get this thing done. Nope. Now this engine, this is a 478-SUC. It's made by Powermore for MTD, and then they private label it under their MTD brand. It's on a lot of different units though. Anything MTD, Cub Cadet, Bolens, anything that uses this bigger engine, even the smaller engines a lot of times are made by Powermore. They make a whole lot of stuff and private label it to, I believe, a whole lot of different companies too. We got the 10mm out there, the 2 over on this side. I'm gonna go ahead and take the choke knob off, just a screwdriver, and if you pry back behind it, it'll pop right off. So you try to get as close to the middle where there's a lot of meat as you can. Just pry that right off of there. The easiest way to take your throttle knob off is just to grab it with a pair of pliers, and then you can kind of hit on the pair of pliers. All right. Nice and easy there. I just grabbed it, and then I'm hitting just kind of right here as it'll pull it right off of there. So that kit that we got, the aftermarket carburetor, came with gaskets, it came with a primer bulb, it came with a spark plug. Don't ever use that aftermarket spark plug. Those, the first thing you do with those, you throw them right in the trash. That's all you do with those. Came with a couple extra keys, and then the gasket's also a primer line. So we'll want to replace all that while we're in here. Got 2 more over here for the front face of the unit that are 10mm. And now the whole front face is loose. So I thought we could get it off without taking these 2 off, as I remembered. Apparently you got to take the 2 out over here too, no big deal. And the whole front face just comes up and off. So you got to kind of wiggle it a little bit, because at the bottom this piece tries to get caught on your mounting bracket. So you got to move it out to the right a little bit before it comes up and moves past that. So at this point we can take the primer line off. Oh wow, this thing's not in real good shape. It doesn't look like down here. Looks like the governor linkage isn't even hooked up, and the plate for the throttle looks like it's completely melted. So this may be a lost cause, but we're sure gonna find out. I really didn't want to start this thing with all that rust and nasty fuel and stuff in there, or even try to start it. Didn't want to get any of that up through the system. So again, this may just be a basket case at a lost cause, but we're gonna figure out one way or the other whether it is or it isn't. 2 on the front for the carburetor. Take those off. Just two nuts on the front, and then the whole assembly pops off. So there's one piece that just kind of sits like this, comes off, and then your other assembly for the air cleaner box. Now this is kind of strange that it's got the hole here. I'm sure it's a universal or something, and then it's actually got the side piece for the crankcase vent that goes back into the carburetor. Some of those just vent back to earth anyway, or back to regular air. It's not like you get a whole lot of debris or anything when you're out snow blowing. So, and just a lot of times if you move it back and forth and then just pry it straight up and off, get that free. Now normally you're going to go ahead and pull it towards you, and then you're going to move the throttle plate a little bit so you're able to get this up and out. In this case, this thing, I mean, it's hard telling what happened here. It almost looks like it was on fire at some point. I mean, it's completely melted. So kind of worries me about that, but we're going to continue on. Take the fuel line off, just the clamp on the back side. And then we're going to just drain that down into a bucket. We use just a 1/4 inch fuel line with a fuel shutoff of some sort. Again, if you take it and you just go to the side, it'll break it free. So if you twist it, it'll break it free. That way you don't rip that fuel line as it's coming up and off. Now with this stuff smells so bad it's not even funny. So I'm not really too worried about breaking the fuel line because we're going to replace it anyway. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, look at that stuff coming out of there. That's just wonderful. That's what's coming out of our tank. That's what's in our carburetor. Some of the worst fuel, some of the worst rust I've seen in the tank in a long time, and I do a lot of these. So From there, your unit comes up and off. Now on this, it is a little bit difficult to squeeze past. So basically, I'll show you what to do here. So it wants to be blocked by your unit here. So if you pull straight towards you, and then you move the unit up and out to the side, and that'll get it off without having to remove this handle. If you have trouble or you can't get it by just kind of forcing it out and moving it up, then you go ahead and remove this bottom bolt here holding the handle and kind of pull the handle towards you as you're removing it. Yeah, so I'm not sure again what happened there, but that's very interesting. Very interesting. I've honestly never seen one like that. So definitely looks like something was going on. Anyway, we'll go ahead and let that drain. And then what we'll do, since we're replacing the whole tank and everything, we're gonna have to take the assembly off up top. Ugh, sorry, trying to get this gas drained out of this carburetor. I don't want it anywhere in here. It's just, whew, it's real bad shape right now. So just letting what's in the carb drain out into my bucket so we can remove this fuel as soon as possible and we don't get that smell all through here. Boy. Just throw that to the side. So the unit, we'll need this one taken off. And then there's one over here also to get to where your fuel line is. That whole assembly just comes off. That whole assembly, one on the side and one there. And then we can just take this fuel tank and go up and out with it. So the whole fuel tank comes up and comes out. So the fuel tank is off and out of the way. We're still gonna go ahead and let this thing drain for a little bit. It's, again, in pretty stinking bad shape. I'm gonna set it on the side here, see if we can't let it finish draining out. Set it somewhere where I can get a good angle on it. There we go. Whew. Sorry, that stuff's kind of just bugging the heck out of me. That's horrible. Anyway, from there, we're gonna go ahead and get our fuel tank out here. We've got our tank and our carb. First thing I always like to do, whether it's OEM or not, go ahead and check the carb before you do anything. Now these carbs, I did a video a while ago on a Huahi. There's a couple tiny little pieces of metal in there. So that's why we always open them no matter what. I mean, pretty much any brand, make, model, whether it's OEM or aftermarket, they're gonna have something in the bottom of the bowl. Quality control on the things and the manufacturing process is not the best, so blow that out. Just make sure we start off with nice fresh units. So this one's good. Tighten that back up. Put the carb over there. Now we've got the fuel tank. I'm going to open it. So, nice fuel tank. Apparently it doesn't come, I thought it came with a fuel cap also. So we'll want to grab one of those, but it does come with your inlet and everything like that. We're going to go ahead and match up the fuel line real quick, get some fuel line added to it, and then we're going to get this thing put back together and see what happens once we install it. Yeah, I would have thought for sure that would have came with a fuel cap. I'm not sure that I want to clean that other one up or not. I'll worry about that a little later, but probably what I'll do is just, I've probably got some back here. This is one we're actually selling anyway, so not like it's a customer's or anything like that, but this fuel cap is just horrible. So there's, I mean, you can tell just by looking at it. I think I actually have another one outside. They're the same on the bigger and the smaller units, so I'll probably just go grab one of those and go from there. Just matching it up to the old fuel line length. Once we match it up, we can go ahead and cut it. I'm going to also use some new fuel clamps on this. Don't want to reuse those old sweaty ones. Usually you try to reuse those, and what you get is that they break right when you're trying to put them on, right when you're in the middle of everything. So keep that from happening. Right. And if you want, you can reuse the old fuel line, but I guarantee you there's going to be some rust, and I guarantee you that it's not in real good shape on the inside. So it does come with the rubber grommets and all that stuff, so that's good. We can throw this back up top. Get this adjusted a little bit. All right. Ooh. There we go. That stuff still just smells horrible. I mean, I'm not very sensitive to gas most of the time or anything like that. We use the gum out carb cleaner when we're cleaning the carbs because it's a little bit better as far as not being so noxious as some of the other carb cleaners, but I don't really get bothered by it too much. But that stuff there is really, really bad. I'm gonna blow this out up top too, just under the tank. Might as well blow all around just to make sure everything's cleaned out. So from there, you want to make sure that the intake gasket is good as you're going to put this back on. So we'll throw the tank up on there. I'm not going to bolt everything down right now until we get everything all the way going, but so everything's nice and good here. Right to the unit, the intake gasket. So if it breaks free from the back side, you always want to replace that back intake gasket also. Otherwise, 9 times out of 10, you'll have an air leak. And we kind of want to check this out anyway, because it looked like on the top. Yeah, so it doesn't look real bad. What you can do is you can try to go ahead and scrape all that off, and you can replace it. But since it's in just about perfect shape, as it looks right here, all we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to double it up. We're going to put another one on there. All right, so I found a gasket, and basically all I did, I didn't have a gasket that was exactly the same. This is kind of a strange engine. So basically what I did is I took one of these gaskets that we have, standard like Honda GX360 gasket, and I essentially just cut a little bit out here so that everything matched up all the way around. As long as the gasket is sealing around this bead here, you can see it was only sealing for, I don't know, a couple millimeters around the outside edge and around the oval here. As long as that's going to seal, it's not going to matter. So I modified that a little bit. That's one thing in any of this type of business that you're doing, you've got to be able to fix things on the fly. You know, people aren't going to want to wait forever to get their things fixed and stuff like that. This thing's going to run great anyway after we get it done. Nobody's going to realize that that gasket's different because it functions exactly the same as whether you had an OEM one or not. So obviously if you don't have one of these and you're in the field doing this, you can try to reuse the old ones, but a lot of times you'll have an air leak there if you don't, you know, get that addressed at some point. Having a hard time getting these back in the, there we go, back in the notch. I'm gonna throw our new gasket on the front. Now I don't really like these gaskets a whole lot. What happens a lot of times is they're super thin and you get some leaks and stuff out of them. Sometimes I'll double them up depending on how thick they are. This one actually that came with it feels a lot thicker than the original one I put on, but it's not gonna hurt it to have 2 gaskets on it. And that just kind of ensures that, you know, you're not going to get a leak there. So we're set on that side. We can go ahead and put the carb back on. And again, to do this, you'll get this top one in, kind of at an angle. And then you'll just kind of push down as you're guiding it in. So push the carb down as you're guiding it in, pop that other one, and you're in. Now when you're putting it on, I always like to get the spring on first. For some reason it just seems easier to me than fighting with it afterwards. Now this spring is important. Some people say that it's not. Some people say, oh, it doesn't do anything. Well, a lot of times it actually does. Anytime you get any play in the linkage whatsoever, that spring keeps that play out of the linkage. So we've got the spring on, we'll pull it back out and just push it down in. So it's got to be out and kind of at an angle to get it inside the unit. So once you pull it out, push it down in, you've got everything together there. Now you want to make sure after you're here that you can put it on high throttle, but that should snap back. If it's not snapping back, shouldn't be anything in the way of it. If it's not snapping back, you've got issues. So, all right. Looks like my fuel line is not going to be long enough for some reason, unless I don't have it in place here. Let's see. Okay, it is. It just seemed like it wasn't there for a second. I thought I was going to have to cut another piece. I cut it a little bit close, which is strange because I always try to leave a little bit more room than I should. Just, you can always cut off a little more, but we would have used it somewhere else anyway. But that's perfect, and you don't want it again next to your linkage here. If it's in the way of that linkage, you're going to have issues. So, there we go. Perfect, perfect. So it should sit real close to there, but it shouldn't, nothing should be hitting there while you're going. So I think it actually sits on the underneath here. There it is. Yep, to keep it out of the way. Now I did have somebody in a recent video comment on you know, starting bolts and things like that without starting them by hand. I've been doing this for a long time and I know how to do that without stripping anything out, but they are right about that. If you start bolts without you know, with a power tool or something like that, without starting them by hand first, if you're not knowing exactly what you're doing, you know, it's very easy to strip them. But you know, if you're familiar with it, as long as you're staying 100% horizontal to it, you're not going to strip anything out, you know. And as long as you're not, I'm barely hitting the trigger, so if I hear anything start to impact or anything like that before it's where it's supposed to be, or before I know it's on those threads correctly, I back it off and then I restart. Never have I had a problem with that. It's pretty straightforward. Now before we put this back together, we're going to go ahead and replace the primer line and the primer bulb. So cut it to length. Now if you need to know how to clean this carburetor, we do have a carburetor cleaning video on this carb, I believe, or at least a replacement video. I'm not really sure which. I remember doing one recently, but so we can take this out and you can either pry behind. We're not worried about what happens to it because it's coming out and we're replacing it with a new one. So I'm not sure exactly where the new one went, but I've got plenty of them on hand. Got another one. You're just going to pop it back through. And then we'll put our primer line on the back side. And then we're going to hook it up. Now a lot of times they have clips and stuff going to these. I think those are kind of one of the most ridiculous things there are. No reason to clip it off. Here you can go ahead and put your breather line back on also for the valve cover vent, crankcase vent, whatever you want to call it. And then we can put our front cover back on. Now make sure all this stuff stays out of the way as you're doing that. It is kind of easy to get it back in the way. You've got to just hold it up and away from everything. So you don't want it smashed in the front of the face as you're trying to do this. And you can see still from the side once you've got it in, so you can pull it away, push everything together, make sure everything's lined up. And then we'll go ahead and tighten them down. Now you do want to make sure that when you're doing this, that you're getting everything lined up before you're tightening anything down. If you're going to tighten it down first, all you're going to do is run into issues with things not lining up correctly. Happens to a lot of people because they think that, you know, we can go ahead and start a couple and tighten everything down. Well, that's not the case. You know, you really have to get everything started before you're going to do anything like that. Otherwise it won't line up. You know, even here it's not really wanting to line up great. Well, I don't have anything tightened down, so it's easy to pull it and get it going. I've got everything but one in at this point. It's the only reason I tighten that up. I know that this top up here can go in easily. So that's the last one I need to line up. A little easier if you can see what you're doing. It's on the back side, but go. Get it started and off we go with the tin. And we're going to come back over and I'm going to go ahead and tighten up everything now. So I've already tightened the bottom one. Already got it 100%. I'm going to go up a little higher so we can get the tank in here also. Tighten everything up. Now you do want to make sure that this sits in the right place. The tank does before you're installing all that fuel line and putting this back together. I made sure everything was lined up, but if it's not lined up, you're going to run into an issue where you're going to go to put the unit back on and you're going to realize that the fuel line could be too short because the fuel tank needs to move another inch forward or something like that. Looks like I'm going to need some washers to hold that tank on real well. I don't know if they were just stuck on the other one. Oh yeah, there's little grommets that go down in there. So these little grommets need to be taken out of the old one and put in the new. I didn't even realize those were there. It didn't come with it. And they just pop straight up and out. Super easy to get. And we got the two back in the middle. Now you do want to make sure when something's been sitting this long that you definitely change that oil. You know, it doesn't look bad whatsoever. It looks like brand new fresh oil. You don't know how long it's been in there. You know, I hate to use oil that's been sitting around for God knows how long, and it's only you know, a couple bucks to get some new oil on the thing. If you ruin your unit because the oil's not lubricating properly, or it could even be the wrong weight. You don't know what was put in there. We're not the ones who did it, so just always be cautious of that. If you're not gonna replace the carb, if you're gonna clean it, you wanna flush out that tank real well. All right. So we've got all that good to go. We're gonna put the throttle piece back on. We're gonna put our choke piece back on these. It makes it nice and easy, and now we're going to go ahead and fill it up, get some fuel in the unit. Once we get some fuel in the unit, we'll see how this thing runs, see what we actually have out of this snowblower, see if we brought it back to life or not. So we went ahead and got a fuel cap, just a different one we had laying around, just to make sure it doesn't spray all over the place. We'll go ahead and give it some choke here, fire this thing up and see how it runs. We definitely got a little bit of popping and cracking and stuff going on, just a tiny bit. Runs pretty smooth though, pretty good. We're gonna go ahead and check the valves at this point, just make sure that they're within spec and everything like that. They may be a little bit too tight or way out of adjustment, one or the other, causing some of that. This thing, for all intents and purposes though, is ready to go. So we're gonna throw a new plug and change the oil and all that good stuff in it. Check the valves just for good measure. Go ahead and air up the tires, adjust the skids, and this thing will be ready for sale. Thanks for watching. like and subscribe.